Welcome to AK Recap. Today I'm going to explain the movie called Nice View. Released in the year 2022. The movie begins with a man named Jing Hao. He has a 6-year-old sister named Jing Tong who is older than him. They are the only residents of this rented home. Every day, he had to look after Jing Tong and drive her to school. After dropping off his sister that day, Jing Hao went to a specialist who treated his sister's illness. It is said that Jing Tong, who was 6 years old, had an abnormality in her heart. As a result, when the air pressure is low, the breath is often short of breath. Jing Tong's disease is a hereditary disease. It was when Jing Hao was a child. Their mother was also admitted to the hospital and later died from the same disease, while his father prefers to abandon them. The doctor predicted that Jing Tong's condition would worsen once she reached the age of 8. As a result, the doctor advised Jing to operate on his sister as soon as possible. Jing Hao actually desired to operate on his sister. However, the money needed was certainly not small. Besides that, Jing Hao only works every day by opening a cell phone repair business which does not pay well. Later that evening, Jing Hao receives a phone call from his friend Ji Yong. Ji Yong works in a warehouse, and Ji Yong's call to Jing Hao is to show him a mountain of unused cell phones. All of the cell phones were left by an import-export businessman who is currently imprisoned for failing to pay a 2-year warehouse rent. 11 Yong and the warehouse workers also confiscated the items, and the warehouse was scheduled to be vacated soon. So, Xiong offers Jing 100,000 yen for all the phones. Jiang was confident that in the hands of Jing Hao, this phone could be repaired and resold, so that Jing could profit from selling the phone. When he returned home, Jing Hao immediately checked the cell phone's quality test file, which, on average, failed the quality control. Jing Hao tries to fix one of the phones as well. With years of experience repairing damaged cell phones, the phone was able to turn on again. Realizing he could justify purchasing the phones, he made the decision to purchase all of them. Next day, Jing Hao applied for a loan by pledging his entire shop's contents. The next morning, he went to the electronic sales center to sell his product, and while doing so, he calculated his profits. After estimating a profit of 900,000 yen. The sum is substantial, more than enough to operate on his sister. He will also be able to raise his standard of living and expand his business in the future. Unfortunately, the government issued a new trade policy 2 weeks later, where it is later prohibited from marketing recycled cell phones. Cell phones already in use will be confiscated, and the seller will be arrested. The policy was obviously detrimental to Jing Hao, who was about to launch his business. Jing Hao only sold a few units, while other cell phone warehouses continue to grow. Jing Hao then decides to visit the Shining Electronics headquarters, Jing Hao's cell phone manufacturer. After that, he met a manager named Li Ping. Jing Hao offers to sell the spare parts of the cell phone that he recovered to the market. Because, according to Jing Hao, there is a large market in the international market and this business will become an industrial chain. However, Li Ping refused because he believed the spare parts offered by Jing Hao were inferior. The mobile phone repairman failed the quality control test. Jing Hao was certain that the parts would pass the inspection. Li Ping accepted Jing Hao's request with a heavy heart. After that, he worked hard day after day, beginning with dissecting the smallest of the smallest components. Of course, it was not easy, but with his hard work and persistence, he was eventually able to complete everything. Complete with a self-created guidebook. Part quality tests were also performed, and the Jing Hao parts passed the quality test. The first step was completed successfully. He then went to meet Li Ping, who happened to be greeting Mr. Zhao, the managing director of Shining Electronics. Jing Hao finds that the components have passed the test and recalls the deal from yesterday that if Jing Hao passes the test, Ping will buy the parts. However, Li Ping claims he never said that. He also tells Jing to stop bothering him because Li Ping is skeptical of Jing Hao and now he is still only 20 years old. Not discouraged, Jing Hao waited for Mr. Zhao and made the same proposal, asking for 10 minutes to explain. Mr. Zhao, who was hurrying to board the carriage, ignored Jing Hao. Don't give up, Jing Hao decided to ride his motorcycle to the train station. Fortunately, Jing Hao arrived on time and requested another 10 minutes from Mr. Zhao. After hearing Jing Hao's presentation, Mr. Zhao claims that Jing Hao will be unable to save all of the phone's components. Mr. Zhao asked Jing Hao if he could do it. Zhao agrees. However, he will not provide an advance. He had Jing Hao handle the dismantling himself, and even Zhao refused to supply factories or workers if the parts failed the quality test. Zhao also refused to give any funds and didn't care how much Jing Hao spent. Zhao then instructed Jing on how to contact Li Ping when he was ready. Of course, this agreement is fraught with danger. If he succeeds, he will be a millionaire, otherwise he will be a loser. After a few days later, unable to repay his debts, Jing Hao was forced to surrender all of his business premises. For extra money, the only motorcycle had to be sold. The next day, he goes to see his friend Ma Yue in order to find a side job. After pleading with Ma Yue, he agrees to let Jing work as a skyscraper window cleaner there. The following day, Jing Hao and Liang went to find a location for their factory and discovered a filthy and dusty container. Targets were set. The raw materials have also been relocated to a new warehouse, and only one worker remains, because they are unable to afford a standard salary. The employment agency suggests looking for retired employees. He recommended several people. First, there's Kan Moi, who used to work in an electronics factory. However, due to an accident, she is unable to hear well and is currently working on jobs. Kan Moi, Jing Hao had to yell in order to teach her. The second is Zhang, who used to be a manager. However, he was imprisoned for beating someone. Zhang had an unusual personality, yet Jing Hao was able to teach Zhang patiently. Then there was Hansa. He spends his days playing video games, but he has repented and wishes to find work, and he desired to marry a woman. He also begs Jing to take his friend Cho with him. Liang, on the other hand, brought some nursing home patients who he stated wished to help Jing Hao. Despite their age, their professional experience can be useful. Long story short, the Nice View electronic components factory will employ these people. Jing Hao must work as a skyscraper glass cleaner during the day to aid with the operation of his factory, as anticipated. Meanwhile, Jing Tong's condition has not changed, and she must continue to take the same medication every day. All Jing Hao could do was console his sister so she would no longer be sad. Then, one afternoon, Jing Hao and Liang approached a man who offered to sell Jing Hao his cell phone, so they may later sell the metal made from the cell phone's components. Of course, Jing Hao rejected because it was prohibited. Hangzi later married the woman he admired. All of the factory workers were present to celebrate his wedding, and Jing Hao was trusted to give a speech at the ceremony. When Jing Hao returns from the wedding party, he is evicted from the rented residence and forced to pay his arrears for 3 months. With nowhere to stay that night, Jing Hao had to enlist the assistance of Lian's wife so that Jing Tong could spend the night in their home. Next day, Jing Hao chooses to bring his sister to live in the factory. The bedroom was constructed and insulated entirely out of cardboard boxes. It was the most difficult ordeal for Jing Hao to watch a sick sister sleeping in an unsuitable area. However, due to a dire situation, he had to be willing to let his sister sleep at the workplace. Seeing his younger sister's condition, Jing Hao did not want to give up on the situation because the happiness he truly desired at this moment was to watch his sister recover from an illness. As a result, Jing Hao spent his time working non-stop. He works as a glass cleaner during the day and is willing to stay up late at night to work on the missing production. The agony of Jing Hao did not end there. The owner of the factory summoned him one day because he was 2 months behind on his rent. Jing Hao naturally requested leniency because he was now experiencing difficulties. However, the landlord is unconcerned and asks Jing Hao to pay off the arrears or go. One day in the midst of a storm and strong rain, Jing Hao attempted to stop La Ping's car. Jing Hao asks Li Ping in the car for a loan of 100,000 yen since he is in dire need. But Li Ping refused, claiming that Mr. Zhao established a deal with him because he admired Jing Hao. But, if Zhao meets you today, would he still give his respects? Li Ping said. Hearing this, Jing Hao realized there was a point, because at times like this, he had to work on his own to complete the job. Jing Hao really didn't know what to do. He just remembers his mother's dying day pledge to take excellent care of Jing Tong. The next morning, he discovered that the roof where he had stored his cell phone had fallen due to the precipitation the night before. Plus, the landlord stated that Jing Hao had 3 days to pack his belongings since the factory would be rented out to someone else. Jing Hao's heart was broken. He also had to break the bad news to all of his friends, despite the fact that the products will be delivered in 2 weeks. However, he was unable to pay their salaries. Surprisingly, his friends were willing to pay their salary once the work was completed. In addition, they said that they could take this work home and they could ask their friends to help meet the deadline. They advised Jing not to tackle this situation alone, because they already considered Jing Hao to be a member of the family. They then finished the work from their respective homes. Jing Hao and Jing Tong are temporarily residing and working at the elderly home. Jing Tong awakens from her sleep one night and thanks her brother for working so hard to care for her. The delivery day arrived. Finally, the dismantled components are sent for quality testing. Long story short, Jing Hao and his buddies were summoned to the Shining Electronics office to speak with Mr. Zhao. First, Mr. Zhao greatly appreciates Jing Hao's hard effort in completing the order on time. Then he said if their components pass the quality test with an 87% success rate, Mr. Zhou will also continue to collaborate with Jing on a 2-year contract for a 5 million yen project. Jing Hao's long-awaited sacrifice has finally paid off. A year after the contract ran out, Jing Tong's surgery was a success and she was able to grow normally and healthy. Jing Hao became CEO of Nice View Electronics 6 years later. He was introduced to the public as the youngest CEO of a division of Shining Electronics. Something that sometimes seems impossible before it is achieved, but keep working hard. Because as long as we move, nothing is impossible to achieve. Thanks for watching my video. Please, like and subscribe for more video. See you later.